Hi everybody, it's Eric Murray from the sugarhuddle.com. Well, I just wanted to do this video recapping my college football pick 6 week 10 picks. And obviously in week 10 we're winding down towards the end of the season here, and some divisions and some of these major conferences getting decided here. Unfortunately, we had a couple blowout games, but we also had a couple really good games. I just want to go on down the line and tell you how all my picks fared before we recap the games. So I ended up going 4-2 as far as overall winners, and 2-4 against the spread. So on the season now, I'm 22-32 against the spread, really falling behind. Overall, though, I'm very, very close to getting back over 500. I'm 26-28. So Alabama, they shut out LSU 29-0. I anticipated that they were going to kill LSU, so I won both the spread and the overall. Georgia, Kentucky, I lost both because I actually thought Kentucky was going to win by field goal. They were down 28-3 at one point in the third quarter. They ended up losing to Georgia 34-17, so I lost on both. Arizona State, they were a touchdown underdog at home against Utah, who's ranked 15th, and I thought they were actually going to beat Utah, and they actually did. They pulled away in the fourth quarter. So not only did I obviously cover, but I obviously won the game as well. Arizona State ended up winning 38-20. They were leading 21-20 to start the fourth. Notre Dame Northwestern, I won the game because I thought Notre Dame was going to win this game 28-20, but unfortunately I didn't cover because what I do, if you haven't seen my previous videos or read my previous articles on this, what I do with my spreads is if there's a full point spread, like in this case Notre Dame was a 10-point favorite, I add a half point so there's no pushes. So Notre Dame 10-point favorite, if I wouldn't have added the half point, then I would have pushed on this game, but I didn't want to do that, so I ended up losing this game by a half point. So I lost the spread by half point, but I did win with Notre Dame, so I split on that. Michigan killing Penn State. I didn't anticipate they were going to be up on Penn State this bad. Michigan won 42-7, so I won the game because I thought Michigan was a win, but I had Michigan winning 21-17. They're like a 12.5-point favorite, and obviously they easily covered the spread, but I didn't have them. I had Penn State covering, so I split on that game. And then West Virginia, Texas, I narrowly lost on both because I thought Texas was going to win by a touchdown, bounce back at home, and they were up by a touchdown, but West Virginia was able to score in the final minute, and they decided to go for two, and they got it, and of course we'll go over that. So West Virginia won 42-41. Texas was like a 2.5-point favorite at home on my adjusted line, so I ended up losing out on that. And even if West Virginia would have not gotten that 2-point conversion at the end, I still would have split at best, because West Virginia was still cover the spread. So anyways, just barely lost out on that. But going down the line, first of all, with Alabama, they clinched the SEC West, and by the way, Georgia clinches the SEC East. So not surprisingly, those two teams, who of course played for the national title last year in a legendary epic game in overtime, they'll meet in the SEC title game in Atlanta beginning of December. So that should be a great game, and playoff implications there. And obviously, if Alabama is undefeated going in and Georgia still has just a one loss, Georgia still has Auburn, by the way, this week coming up. But if Georgia can win out and Alabama wins out and then Georgia beats Alabama, all of a sudden we're going to have those two SEC teams in the 4-team college football playoff again, it looks like. So certainly the worst nightmare for people nationally who aren't SEC fans. I don't have a problem with the SEC personally, but a lot of people nationally can't stand the SEC, so obviously it could be a nightmare for a lot of non-SEC fans. Anyways, so looking at Alabama, 9-0 now, obviously, but this game they just came right out and punched LSU in the mouth. And the thing I said on my video for these picks that I did yesterday is that LSU has no passing game. It's just like it was under Les Miles, and even when they had Nick Saban as their coach, where just no passing game. They just don't know how to develop quarterbacks. And Joe Burrow, the year he's having, less than 200 yards a game, 6 touchdowns to 3 picks, he was going to have 300-plus yards and throw a few touchdowns, because you knew his counterpart, Tua Tagovailoa, was going to have a great game for Alabama, Heisman favorite. And the thing about it is Joe Burrow just couldn't get it going at all. LSU offense, just punt after punt after punt. And one thing that Gary Danielson, the CBS play-by-play guy, said about the LSU's defense is they really didn't play that bad. Tua, remember, didn't have a single pass attempt in the fourth quarter this year before this game, and Alabama was averaging 54 points a game. They got held to 29, and LSU's defense really wasn't that bad. But again, when you have no offense, nothing you can really do about it. And Alabama, Tua was actually a little bit off in this game. Threw his first interception of the year, deep ball. Missed on some throws. His wide receivers bailed him out a little bit. Jerry Jeudy and Bugs, or Ruggs, I should say, bailed him out, but on a couple plays. But overall, Tua still played really good. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 27 touchdowns, 1 interception on the year. And, overall, he was 25 of 42, 295 yards. And he had a 44-yard rushing touchdown when they were up 16-0 in the third quarter. So that basically sealed it, put him up 22-0. But then on the other side of it, Burrow, 18 of 35, 184 yards and a pick. The pick was late, not a big deal, but just didn't do anything. Came out, opening drive, had a few nice checkdowns, moved the ball a little bit, and then they quickly punted, and it just kind of went all downhill from there. Rushing-wise, they had 25 carries for 12 yards. Alabama's pass rush was really good. Justin Jefferson, the LSU receiver, he's really the main receiver for them. He had 6 catches, 81 yards. Outside of that, I think the most catches anybody had was like 3, and yardage-wise, like maybe 30 or 40. So LSU, they're so dependent on the running game. If you don't have the running game, you're forcing Burrow to do everything. So Alabama obviously had the great game plan and did exactly what they needed to do. So, I got to give Alabama a lot of credit in this one. And Alabama, their remaining schedule, they had Mississippi State, the Citadel, and then Auburn. Obviously, Auburn with the Iron Bowl is going to be tough. But, Auburn, they had to rally back to beat Texas A&M today. And they're not having the year we all expected them to have. They're 6-3 right now. And obviously, they're going to have Georgia this week coming up. So Alabama should beat them if they don't, overlook them, which I would hope they wouldn't, because, that's your hated rival. But crazy things happen in the Iron Bowl. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. But I do expect, Alabama to win out. And honestly, this is, I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment. This is definitely one of the greatest college football teams I've ever seen. And even their defense, which isn't as dominant as a few of their national title years in the past, still very, very good. And, offensively, by far, Tua's the best quarterback they've had. A.J. McCarron was really good when he was at Alabama, especially at the end of his career. But Tua even blows him out of the water. And, I've mentioned kind of before on my website, for those who've kind of been following me a little bit, that I'm a diehard USC fan. And Tua, he was actually committed to USC for a while in high school. He's a Hawaiian kid, ends up going to Alabama. And actually, I read an article today, I didn't realize this, that if he wouldn't have gotten a chance to play the national title game, he was actually thinking about transferring out of Alabama after his freshman year last year, and wanted to see if USC still has scholarship available for him, which USC would have taken him in a heartbeat, or else they would have been even dumber than I thought they were. So, we were this close to having Tua, but USC, Clay Helton and company would have ruined him probably. So, well, maybe not ruined him. They're good with quarterbacks, but he wouldn't be competing for a national title like he is now, and like he ended up winning last year. So, worked out real well for Tua. But anyways, that's my USC heartbreak story for the day. But anyways, so Alabama, not surprisingly, they did what they were expected to do. And the LSU, speaking of USC, of course, Ed Orgeron was briefly USC's interim head coach for a little while there, a few years back, and he was mad that USC wouldn't hire him permanently, but this was kind of the reason why. Too conservative offensively, again, kind of like a repeat of the Les Miles era. You can win a lot of games on talent and playing defense, but some of these big games, you need quarterback play, and your running game's not always going to get it done, and this is the exact result. So not shocking at all that Alabama was able to do what they were able to do in that one. And then Georgia, go up 28-3, like I said, mid-third quarter. And the main thing is, like LSU, Kentucky isn't really known for its passing game. Terry Wilson went 23 of 29, 226 yards and a score, but he wasn't able to convert some third downs early on. They ended up converting over 50% on the day, but they couldn't convert a couple of them early on. I believe they lost the fumble on their second drive. I believe they missed a field goal in the first half. And like I said, there was a couple key third downs that they couldn't convert early. And then on the other side of it, Georgia, with Kentucky, you have one running back you have to stop in Benny Snell, and that really forces Wilson to put it in the air. Whereas Georgia, you have two great running backs. You have DeAndre Swift and Elijah Real Deal Holyfield. And, Swift, he had an 83-yard touchdown run in the third quarter, great run, ends up with 156 yards and a couple scores. Holyfield, 115 and a touchdown. As a team, they had 331 yards on, I believe it was 50 carries and I think 3 combined rushing touchdowns. So they really got down on the ground, and the nice thing was it wasn't a game where they needed Jake Fromm to really do much. They just needed him to kind of methodically move it down the field a little bit for them, and just make a few throws here and there. I mean, he was 14 of 20, 113 yards and a touchdown. But when you're running games that dominant, when you're running all over your opponent, you know, not a whole heck of a lot you need to do. Georgia, like I said, they won the SEC East, play Auburn this week coming up. They've had some pretty good games against Auburn. Auburn's a good team, but that game is, I believe, in Athens, so that's an advantage. And then they've got two very winnable games after that, so they should come in with just the one loss, playing Alabama in the SEC title game, who should still be undefeated. So really setting up for that to happen. But, you look at Kentucky, Benny Snell, like I said, 20 carries, 73 yards, 84 as a team. Another team that they really set up the pass with their running game. If they don't have the running game going, it's really a setback. So Wilson played a lot better than he has in the past. 72 QBR, which that ESPN QBR scale, 75 or better is what you want to really have a heck of a day. So for 72 QBR, obviously he had a very, very good afternoon, but they got themselves in a big hole there, and they just couldn't finish drives. And obviously Georgia did 14-3 at the half, and they quickly scored a couple touchdowns in the third quarter to quickly make it, like I said, a 28-3 game, and that was all she wrote from there. And then moving on, Michigan, Penn State, like I said, I really didn't expect this to be a... Sorry, here, I got to try to adjust this stupid camera. I really didn't expect this to be a blowout like this. I thought Penn State would keep it pretty competitive. Penn State hasn't been all that this year, and McSorley obviously isn't all that as a passer. Really kind of lost without Saquon Barkley, but still a heck of a runner. And Michigan has a tough run defense, so obviously Penn State was going to have to run it really good. And they were in the negatives for quite a while, rushing-wise, and I'm trying to figure out what they ended up having. 68 rushing yards on the game. A lot of that was kind of down the stretch, garbage time. McSorley had -6, and of course he had a whole bunch of rushing yards coming into this game. On the day, he was 5 of 13, 83 yards and interception. 3.5 was his QBR, and he got knocked out of the game, and then his backup ended up throwing a pick six later on. So just a really, really rough day for Penn State's offense. Just barely on the field because they were constantly punting. Michigan, who, like Penn State, was averaging well over 200 rushing yards a game, but had the better run defense. Like Penn State, like I mentioned in yesterday's video, was giving up 161 rushing yards a game, so not really a juggernaut as far as run defense. Definitely struggling in that area, and it showed in this one because Cron Higdon, he had I think 132 rushing yards for Michigan. As a team, they had 259 on 52 carries and 3 touchdowns. Is exactly what Jim Harbaugh wants. And then the main thing too is I mentioned that McSorley and Patterson are both pretty similar quarterbacks, but McSorley not very accurate, 52.8% passer, I think, coming into this. And he's had some drops, and his receivers aren't as great, but overall not as accurate, not quite the passer that Patterson is. And, with him, he's really a run-first guy, whereas Patterson is a pass-first guy. And Patterson in this one was 11 of 17, 144 yards, and a couple scores, 81.3 QBR. He did a real nice job, and, he had a 23-yard touchdown to Donovan Peoples-Jones, make it 14-0 right before half. And that play kind of opened it up and really was, you hate to say it's a dagger because it was just a 14-0 game, but you just felt like at that point that 14-0, similar to the LSU-Alabama game when it was like 16-0 Alabama, 16-0 felt like 50-0, and the same with this game with Michigan. Michigan, they're at Rutgers, they host Indiana, and then, of course, the big game at Ohio State. I've been saying all year that I'm just not the biggest believer in Michigan, and I've just, until they prove it to me, I can't. It's hard for me to pick against Ohio State, but I'm going to say right now I'm going to change my pick. I've seen enough from Michigan since that Notre Dame game that I think they're finally going to get it done, and they're going to win at Ohio State. I just, what Ohio State did against Purdue a couple weeks ago, absolutely terrible, lost 49-20. And then, what they did on Saturday, they played a 2-6 Nebraska team. They hosted Nebraska, and they beat them 36-31. If it wasn't for some Nebraska mistakes in the first half, Nebraska might have won, and maybe by a couple touchdowns. So Ohio State, there's just something clearly wrong with them right now, and it's just hard to kind of buy into them. So, I just look at it, and I think Michigan, they're going to win the Big Ten East. They're going to beat Ohio State, and we'll see if they win the Big Ten championship game, obviously, You look at some of the teams they might be facing in the Big Ten title game. Right now, it'd be Northwestern. Could end up being possibly Purdue. So pretty winnable games for Michigan. We'll see how it goes, but it's looking like Michigan more and more, if they don't choke, they have a clear path to the playoffs. So this could finally be Harbaugh's year to show that he's been somewhat of a disappointment at Michigan to this point, and this year might be the breakthrough. We'll see. Big difference a quarterback like Patterson can make. So we'll see how that goes. But anyways, great job Michigan's defense. Don Brown, Penn State 24 plays, 91 yards at the half. So did a great job there. And then, of course, the game of the weekend, West Virginia and Texas, classic Big 12 shootout, back and forth scoring. Texas had a 41 to 34 lead late, and Will Grier, who's, of course, is another guy in the Heisman running, led West Virginia right down the field and threw a 33-yarder to Gary Jennings Jr. back of the end zone. He stepped up in the pocket, was a little bit off balance, and he just fired it. It was a dime, and Jennings, when you watch it live, you're like, there's no way he got a foot in, because obviously you need just the 1 foot balance at college. But somehow he got 1 foot in before he, stepped out. Perfect throw to the back line, just an absolute dime, and definitely something NFL-wise that'll definitely help the 50-year senior that is Grier. But West Virginia had, I believe, 3 different receivers with over 500 yards receiving coming into this game, and definitely showed Will Grier did a nice job really picking apart Texas all day long. And this game, the first quarter was really tough to watch because there were so many penalties on both sides. And one thing that Joel Klatt, who's a really good announcer, one of the things he kept pointing out throughout the game was the officiating was just really bad in this one, and there were a lot of missed calls and a lot of calls that were incorrect calls. And anyways, it didn't really benefit either team in the end because Texas was only penalized half as much as West Virginia, 7 for 64. A lot of it was in the first half. West Virginia, 14 penalties, 120 yards. They'll have to clean that up. But again, some suspect officiating also contributed to that. But nonetheless, great job by Grier. He ended up finishing 28 of 42, 346, and 3 touchdowns. And the thing that impressed me the most was their running game because they're not a run-first team by any means, obviously. They're not a run-heavy team, and I think they averaged a little bit less than 150 rushing yards per game. They ended up with 232 on 7 yards of carry and 2 touchdowns in this one. And the thing that's really alarming is, Texas's defense kept them in so many games last year, and they had an opportunity to win so many close games last year and lost most of those close games. And this year they've won most of their close games. Their defense is just completely falling apart. We saw what happened in the fourth quarter against Oklahoma, and luckily for Texas fans, they were able to find a way to pull it off with a game-winning field goal. But then we saw the Oklahoma State game last week. They gave up 17 points and 260 yards in the first quarter alone. This week, basically deja vu. They gave up 220 yards and 17 points in the first quarter, and they trailed, I believe, 17-7 going into the second quarter, and then they were able to get themselves right back in the ball game because obviously West Virginia's defense had issues as well. But Texas won the time of possession battle by 8 minutes. They had 166 rushing yards, which decent. Sam Ehlinger had, I think, 50-some yards and a touchdown. Had 354 passing and 3 touchdowns. But West Virginia, when their running game's not used to doing what they were able to do in this game, and you give up that kind of yardage, Texas defense gave up almost 600 yards. It was like 578. And then, of course, Grier being able to drive them right down the field. Again, one of those games where it's like who has the ball last. And fortunately for West Virginia, they had enough time to drive right down and do what they needed to do. But, of course, the big thing, this one is they score the touchdown. That makes it 41-40. But remember, they got to make the extra point to basically force overtime. And Dana Holgorsen, the head coach, who, of course, looks like Bill Murray straight out of Kingpin, he's like, let's go for 2. And, for me, if I were a college football coach, because I despise college football overtimes, I would probably, if I had an opportunity to win the game at the end going for 2, probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, I would probably go for 2 instead of playing for overtime. So I really liked the call, even if they wouldn't have got it. And initially, Grier threw a slant to David Sills, his best receiver, but there was a whistle on it because Texas used a timeout. They used back-to-back timeouts to see the formations that West Virginia was using. And then the second time around, Will Grier, who's not known for his running or scrambling abilities, anything like that, he did a draw and he bounced it easily to the left side. Nobody there was able to walk in and did the down horns logo, and it got a penalty there. But great play design by Dana Holgerson and his staff. So anyways, West Virginia, remember the way the Big 12 is doing it now, they have a conference championship game again, but they're not doing divisions. The way they're setting it up is whoever the top 2 teams are, league record wise, league standing wise, by the end of the regular season will play each other in a conference title game. And West Virginia is on a collision course with Oklahoma right now, but of course I believe they have Oklahoma coming up here real soon. So we'll kind of see. Texas might still be in this thing, but I don't know. It's not looking too good for them. Very, very, very bad defense right now, and they're a team that after a couple losses in a row, you just wonder where they're heading the rest of the season. We kind of knew they were a little bit of a fraudulent team, but you wonder, are they on their way to like 7-5, or are they going to find a way to win out? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Texas, but their defense definitely major step back from last year, and in West Virginia, obviously, they're looking pretty good right now. So be interesting to see if West Virginia can find a way to possibly win the Big 12. And then, of course, Notre Dame, Northwestern, 7-7 game at halftime, and game that obviously Northwestern couldn't do anything offensively, at less than 300 total yards, but Notre Dame wasn't able to finish drives, and so low-scoring game at the half, and then all of a sudden Notre Dame, they go up 24-7 early fourth quarter, I believe, and all of a sudden Northwestern puts together a couple nice drives, makes it 24-21. And then Ian Book, Notre Dame quarterback, made such a huge difference. Brandon Wimbush, this team, when he was still the quarterback for Notre Dame, their offensive rankings were towards the bottom in all of college football. And since Book took over, they've been towards the top in college football in a lot of offensive categories. And he showed why on the drive that put the game away late. 10-play, 89-yard drive. Notre Dame was only 5 of 14 on third downs, and that was kind of the big story for them all night. But the one third down that they needed the most, Book got the job done because it was 3rd and 4, and they called what ended up being a quarterback keeper because he faked the inside handoff, bounced it to the outside, nobody there, was able to walk in from 23 yards out, put the game away 31-21. But, he's a heck of a quarterback. Your remaining schedule, they've got Florida State, they've got Syracuse, which Syracuse top 20 team right now, could be a tough game, and then they're at USC. Yeah, big rivalry game, but USC's not looking too good right now, so if you can get past Syracuse, you should be okay. So, Notre Dame, this is their chance to make their first playoff appearance, and Book, he had a heck of a game. He ended up 22 of 34, 343 yards, a couple touchdowns, 11 carries, 56 yards in that rushing touchdown. As a team, they didn't do a whole lot, 121 rushing yards and 3 yards a carry, but did what they needed to do in the end. And, the thing that was interesting is I kind of talked about with Northwestern, you have to find any little leg up to give yourself a chance to win this game. And, one thing I talked about is how they were the second least penalized team in college football coming in. They only averaged about 3 penalties for like 30 yards a game. But Notre Dame was ranked 13th, so 2 very disciplined teams. Notre Dame was actually penalized 8 times for 58 yards in this one. Northwestern was not penalized at all, but they couldn't take advantage of that. They couldn't do enough. It still wasn't enough for them to win the game. Another thing, too, as I mentioned, Notre Dame's third downs, Northwestern was actually slightly worse. They were 5 of 15, so any little leg up they thought they had, they couldn't get it done. Another thing, rushing. I just mentioned Notre Dame couldn't really run the ball except for that Book carry at the end. They had like one other, Dexter Williams had like a 20-yard run at one point, but Northwestern just 108 rushing yards on 2.7 yards per carry, had a couple of short touchdowns. So, when you're a team like Northwestern, when you don't have the talent, the depth that a team like Notre Dame could have, and Northwestern, you're at home, Saturday Night Football, you got to find any. Well, actually, it wasn't the Saturday night game. Oklahoma was, but it was ESPN Saturday night game. But, anyways, you got to find any little advantage, any little leg up you can, and take advantage of it. And they couldn't do that. And their team, again, not a whole lot of great skill players. Flynn Nagel's by far their top receiver. Only had 4 catches, 33 yards in this one. Clayton Thorson had a touchdown run that got him back in, a short run, but overall he wasn't very good. 16 of 29, 141 yards and a score. So, again, when you're a team like Northwestern, especially when you were down 24-7 and you came back and made it a 3-point game, any little thing you can do to any little advantage could give you this win. And unfortunately for them, like I said, the penalties, they weren't penalized, but they still couldn't take advantage of it as far as winning the game. Third downs, they were worse than Notre Dame. Rushing, they were worse than Notre Dame. So, anyways, they couldn't find that edge in this ball game. They're still leading the Big Ten West, and they're still control their own destiny as far as possibly playing the Big Ten title game. But they definitely have to play a lot better than this to give themselves a chance to possibly win the Big Ten championship game in December if they can find a way to get there. So we'll see. But anyways, for Notre Dame, much like Michigan, they got a pretty good shot to get into the playoff. Obviously, Notre Dame beat Michigan week 1, so they'll get the edge, get the nod, obviously. But both of them could easily be in the playoff, and who knows? Maybe it would be a 2-versus-3 matchup if something happens to Clemson along the way. You never know. But anyways, that's how that game went, and Notre Dame, another nice win for them. And then finally, Utah and Arizona State, back and forth game early on. Arizona State a 1-point lead, 21-20, going into the fourth. And the main thing that changed is, Tyler Huntley is a quarterback for Utah. He's having a bad day. He was 7 of 15, 88 yards, had a touchdown, a couple picks. So he wasn't doing a whole lot. But the thing is, he's still your starting quarterback. When they were down 21-17 later in the third, he broke his collarbone, and that kind of sunk Utah because now you have a freshman, I want to get his name right here, Jordan Shelley, 4 of 11, 59 yards and a pick the rest of the way for a little bit over a quarter plus. So he was every bit as ineffective. So that right there, their passing game that was only averaging, I think, like 212 yards a game coming in. So really a run-first football team. Had 178 rushing yards as a team, but nonetheless, they still had to make those plays in the passing game. Couldn't get the job done. And for Arizona State, they've got 2 big-time playmakers. Eno Benjamin, running back, he had nearly 1,000 yards coming in. Now he's over 1,000 yards rushing. He had 27 carries, 175 yards, and a couple scores in this game. He had a 44-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter. And then, of course, N'Keal Harry, who was unbelievable against USC a week ago, made some big all-around plays. And, again, unstoppable in this one. Had a 61-yard touchdown reception in the fourth quarter to make it 28-20. He ended up with 9 catches for 161 yards and 3 scores. So, again, Utah, much like Northwestern, really only had like one real good receiver, and I believe it was Britton Covey, and he did nothing in this game. Whereas Arizona State, more weapons, and N'Keal Harry, especially a top NFL prospect, was dominant. And again, same with Benjamin and Manny Wilkins. He's been a decent quarterback at Arizona State, but he's been a little hit or miss at times. He had a heck of a game, 19 of 24, 285, and the 3 touchdowns to Harry. Had 1 pick, but whatever, and 88.3 QBR. Arizona State, they now all of a sudden, coming into the USC game last week, they were last in the Pac-12 South. All of a sudden, they're now leading the Pac-12 South, and they actually control their own destiny. They host UCLA, who's terrible. Then they're at Oregon, who's real good, but winnable. We've seen Oregon fall apart lately. And then they're at Arizona for the Territorial Cup, but Arizona is very beatable as well. So Arizona State, ASU could easily win out on this thing. And, it's kind of funny because everybody's critical of the Herm Edwards hire, and all of a sudden it's starting to already kind of pay off a little bit in year 1. So we'll see if Arizona State can finish strong and possibly win the South and, ultimately play for a Pac-12 title. That would be pretty wild, seeing Arizona State possibly in the Rose Bowl. I believe that would be the first time since the Jake Plummer team of 96, when it was the 97 Rose Bowl, when they almost won the national title, but they just barely lost Ohio State in that one. So anyways, that could be great for Arizona State. We'll see, but it's looking pretty darn good for them right now. Again, last place in the division just over a week ago, and now you control your own destiny. That's a pretty nice turnaround. And the way USC is playing right now, and Utah with their struggles, now they're down to their backup quarterback. ASU could lose one of these last 3 games and still win the South. It's just one of those, the South has been inferior for quite a while now, and it just kind of feels like another year where you lose a few league games. It's no big deal because you're still going to play for Pac-12 title. And if they do get the Pac-12 title game, they're going to end up playing, I think, right now it'd be Washington State if Washington State's able to seal the deal. But again, Washington State's a beatable team. Washington State's a very nice team. They're ranked pretty highly, but not, Arizona State could give them a game. Washington State's not a powerhouse team. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the rest of this Pac-12 plays out. Obviously, a lot of parity once again, and possibly a 4 or 5 loss Arizona State team could end up winning this. whole thing. It'd be pretty crazy to see him in the Rose Bowl with all those losses. But anyways, go to sugarhuddle.com. My Twitter, by the way, is at Eric Murray Sport. I haven't mentioned that before. My Facebook page is the Sugar Huddle, and then of course, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. But anyways, that's my picks, and look out for all my NFL stories and videos coming up here in the next couple days. Thank you.